It is a pleasure to welcome you to this last panel of the day on Chile's challenge, infrastructure to improve competitiveness. Infrastructure is at the core of Chile's ability to remain competitive in the global economy. As a country, we export about $100 billion and import around $85 billion. And more than 90% of our foreign trade moves by sea, which makes ports a critical pillar. But competitiveness is not only about port capacity. It's about the entire logistics chain: efficient roads, resilient railways, dry ports, custom processes, and digital platforms that make trade faster and more predictable. At the same time, regional competition is intensifying. Projects like Chancay in Peru are redefining South America's logistics landscape. While in Chile, we continue to ask, should we build new large-scale terminals such as the San Antonio Outer Port, or instead focus on getting more productivity and resilience out of our existing infrastructure? This debate also connects with broader initiatives such as the Bioceanic Corridor, which aims to cut transport times between Brazil and Asia by up to 10 days, placing northern Chile as a center of regional integration. To explore these very interesting issues, we are joined by this outstanding panel: Mrs. Rosario Navarro, Chairwoman of the Industrial Business Association in Chile, SOFOFA; Mr. Oscar Hasbún, CEO of CSAB, a leading global shipping company; and Mr. Steve Saxon, partner from McKinsey, who co-leads the travel, logistics, and infrastructure practice. Together, we will address how Chile can rise to the challenge of building infrastructure that truly enhances competitiveness, fosters investment, and supports long-term growth. So let's get started. Rosario, we've been hearing all this Chile'Day. We started with what President Frey said in Madrid, and also was repeatedly said by Minister Grau, that we need to go into agreements, public and private sector. In this regard, in review, how critical is the development of modern infrastructure for Chile to achieve sustained growth and strengthen its competitiveness in global markets, and what specific priorities should the private sector and the government focus on to make this a reality?
Thank you, Hernán, for the invitation, for being part of this panel with these distinguished panelists. And as you mentioned, Chile faces a challenge of how to ensure sustainable growth, and in a context that is marked by geopolitical realignment, and obviously about disruptive technologies. So we need to focus on that, but also we need to grow. Our country has grown less than the rest of the world, and infrastructure is and will continue to be a factor in creating a pro-investment ecosystem, reactivating growth, as I mentioned, but also generating quality jobs. That is also a specific demand that our country is facing. So investing in infrastructure is vital for Chile's participation in the global value chains, but also you asked me what priorities we should be focusing. And I think that the first one is a stronger infrastructure and logistic chain based on what we have learned from the past. Concessions are a very good example of what private-public partnership results when you put the specific goal and the specific focus. And also, we need to improve logistical connectivity, not only physical connectivity, but also digital connectivity. We have a huge pending in that point. Technology adoption is very far away from the rest of the world in ports. Maybe Oscar can mention that. We need not only interoperability, but also digital connectivity and security. We believe in SOFOFA that the National Infrastructure Plan is a very good initiative that we can follow and that we can maybe observe, because it's an initiative that moves in the right direction. But as I mentioned, we have another pending that is permits, mostly environmental permits, and we need to work together, public sector, private sector, to resolve those specific priorities, but also, I think, that challenges.
Well, President Frey said, is it working?
I don't know, no. No.
It's working, now it's working. It came too loud suddenly. Well, President Frey said that that permisología is a word that doesn't exist in Spanish, so it's something that we need to...
invent that word because we have a real huge problem there.
I agree with you. Before asking a question to Oscar, I would like to hear from you, Steve, from a broader perspective, since I mentioned the dilemma of investing in new infrastructure instead of using in a more efficient way the existing one. So based on international benchmarks, and being you a consultant from McKinsey, what is the right balance between expanding physical infrastructure vis-a-vis extracting more efficiency through operational reforms?
So should you build more ports or should you make the existing ports better?
Yep.
I think it has to be both. And I think evidence shows us that having an efficient port sector leads to low costs for importers, low costs for exporters. That has huge ripple-through benefits to the economy, to consumers because imports get cheaper, and to exporters because the exports get cheaper. And it makes the country and the area around the ports very attractive for manufacturing to come and set up. And the economic value created for the nation by a port is so much greater than the cost of building the port itself. I would always encourage countries to think about over-investing in port infrastructure, maybe even ahead of demand, because of the stimulation it brings to the broader economy. Now, that said, on productivity, that's obviously the cheapest way of getting more capacity. And as we look at it, all of Chile's ports are in the bottom half of global productivity. Right? So you probably could get at least 50% more through the current ports with a concerted effort on port operations. But I would invest as well, because I'm such a believer in how the port can build the broader economy.
We'll go back to that point later, but Oscar, there's been a big discussion in Chile for the new outer port out of San Antonio, and which would increase the capacity from current 3.5 million TEUs to 6.5 million, but with an investment in two stages, public about $2 billion, and private another $2 billion in 3 stages. And this will allow to have more vessels, these 400-meter length vessels with a 14,000 TEU capacity. So in this respect, do you see this feasible from an economic point of view, or we should wait? Because doing both, I agree with Steve, but resources are limited. And in Chile, we have a lot of other needs that we'll talk later, in infrastructure as well. So what is your view regarding the truly need of this infrastructure looking 50 years ahead?
Thank you, Hernán, for the invitation, first of all. And let me make a little disclosure first, because I'm sitting in 2 chairs, right? We have the majority stake on a company which moves around 20% of the Chilean cargo import and export from the shipping point of view. But through the ports, we run as a concessions in Chile, 40% of the cargo is also moved. So we have the experience of a shipping company and of a terminal operator. So I'm coming from that. I feel not having any conflict of interest at all with the ports, because ports concessions are finishing by 2030, and we are very happy that it will be open to compete. So said that, I cannot disagree with what you have said. I mean, I think we need productivity and we need investments. And I think we have to expand the capacity. But if I can give some objective data, which I think is good to land the discussion properly. Chile have today capacity to move 7.3 million TUs altogether. We move 4.5 million TU altogether. So utilization of the system is 64. When you look at the north, utilization is 52, 53. When you look in the south, utilization is around 50. So we have a lot of infrastructure which is being underutilized, right? The central area of the infrastructure, which is the largest port area, 55% of the cargo goes out through that, is 72% utilized today, right? So then the question is where to put your money, right? And where to invest. My view, our view is you should balance to get better infrastructure closer to the production areas where you produce the cargo. Here I see many friends which are in the forest industry, right? That's the largest generator of cargo in the country is the forest industry. Those ports are empty in that area. You could, the fruits, for example, are produced every day more south, but trucks are bringing the fruit from Talca, driving 400 kilometers to San Antonio and not driving 200 to Talcahuano. So the question is whether you need to have or not a megaport. Megaport exists in the world for two reasons, basically. One, because you are a very large economy, so you need 24,000 TU vessels to bring your gateway cargo and to leave your gateway cargo, right? We, as I said, we bring to Chile 14,000 TU vessels. All the cargo that comes to San Antonio is 3,000 containers. So the vessel is half empty. So we will never bring out 24,000 TU if there is no cargo, because that's very inefficient and very expensive for the country. Yep. So the question to build a resilient logistic chain, supply chain, in my view, with a lot less money than the outer port, and I would say with half of the money, you build the same capacity. Basically, in Valparaiso and in the new concessions in San Antonio, you can grow up to 2 million TU of capacity, investing probably $1 billion. In case of Valparaiso, with another billion, you get another million TU. So you build, and then you have all of a sudden the same 6.5 million, 5 million TU of capacity in the central area with half the investment. So you still have money to build a train from 8 region to central zone. And then you distribute the cargo. You say basically, as many countries, this is not new because this is public infrastructure. You say, look, if you produce from the 7th region south, you go to San Vicente or to Talcahuano or to the port that CAP is willing to do, not to San Antonio. Then you free capacity and use empty capacity. Zero public investment, what I'm saying. This is all private money. While the outer port is $2 billion of public investment. We saw the presentation of our minister this morning. So my view is we are ending now in 5 years, 30 years of very successful private investments in the port. The ports have never been a bottleneck for growth. The bottleneck, you mentioned a few things, but it's not the topic of this panel. But so the question is now we have 5 years to think, how do we work to organize this and how to make this investment more resilient? And I think this is what we need to do. The concept of the outer port comes from a country which was growing 5-6% per year. The cargo is the same tons of cargo, Chile, today than 12 years ago. No one single additional ton, same number of TUs. So I'm not saying we don't have to invest for growth. I'm saying we can grow smarter in terms of infrastructure.
Okay, Rosario. I mentioned as well that Peru, it's becoming, I don't know whether a competitor or building its own infrastructure in terms of ports for increasing their capacity. But Chancay was built and it's operating now, and it's an important port, although its capacity, it's only about 1.5 million TEUs per year. But do you see Chancay more of a threat or an opportunity for Chile as an exporter, given its potential to reshape supply chains in the Pacific Rim?
I think that you mentioned efficiency, productivity. So I think that Chancay is going to be an opportunity for Chile. Not only because Chile is prepared, as you mentioned, we have a real network of seaports, but also I think that Chancay is a reminder that we cannot remain in our comfort zone. So we need to break our traditional models, maybe asking these questions that you mentioned. Are we innovating? Are we taking technology beyond? Are we having long-term views as we invest in our country? And I think that we cannot depend only on infrastructure, port infrastructure, but it's also a good opportunity to invest in technology. We were talking before the panel, how are we getting prepared for that? Are we preparing our workforce to operate with new technologies? Are we adopting technology in our ports and in our companies? Are we facing the real problem that Chile is having in preparing the talent for the future? So as we in SOFOFA, we are preparing for that. We are launching a very innovative program that is called Hazlo con IA, because we believe in the way that we adopt new technologies. Maybe Chancay is going to be not only opportunity, but also a challenge for our country to face these new technologies. And you know, people like to compete. And we are competitive animals. So having a big port in Peru maybe is going to make us have real good reflections about being more efficient.
Yeah. And regarding this, because we've been talking about infrastructure and talking about ports, but let me follow with you, Rosario, with another question regarding companies, since you are the leader of SOFOFA. Do you see that our Chilean companies, not the big size companies, but more like the middle size exporters and importers, which are, and we hope to grow in that area, but they are prepared to engage these smart ports that we're talking about, working 24/7 operations with digital customs, traceability systems, etc., in order to improve our competitiveness as a country?
I think that we have the opportunity to do that, but now we are not very prepared. But we need to be prepared, so that's the important thing. I believe that maybe big companies can take them by the hand and show them how to do that, not only because they are our own providers in some specific solutions, but also because if we want that prosperity arrives all the regions and all the industries, we need to help them to be prepared. But now we have this huge difference between big companies and small ones. And that is a very good reflection, because we need to push them, help them, but it's also a main thing, because if they don't do that, they are not going to survive in this competitive environmental.
Good. Steve?
May I comment something on Chancay? Because
of course.
I think I was saying 2 reasons to build large ports, or because you are a large economy, the US, China, Europe, right? So you need really these huge vessels, or because you are a hub, because you are like Frankfurt Airport. Nobody goes to Frankfurt. People pass by Frankfurt, right? But nothing wrong with Frankfurt. I'm in Germany every month, so. But it's like I will tell you, look, you're going to go to Berlin, but instead of going through Frankfurt, I have to send you through Singapore. This is San Antonio, Singapore. in the world, right? We are a terminal at the end of the planet. So it's not a good hub because location is bad, right? So Peru will be a hub. It is a hub already. There is Callao, there is Pozorja in Ecuador, there is Panama. And what has happened to Chile makes your supply chain more resilient. Because, I mean, we are integrated to the globe. So if Panama Canal tomorrow closes, yes, we have a problem, right? If Callao closes, we have a problem. If Shanghai closes, we have a problem everywhere. It's an interconnected economy. But one cannot build everything like we would be alone. Otherwise, we are in North Korea, with all respect to North Korea, right? But, I mean, we are built as a global country, exporter, and we need to have good treaties, good agreements, and this will create resilience to the supply chain.
But we are never going to be a hub.
Never going to be a hub. And, just to give you objective data again, we transship globally 65% of the cargo, and no problem. Chilean cargo, Chilean copper is transshipped as well. So this is nothing to be concerned. If you have a huge port, which is well located, and all of a sudden 25,000 TEU vessels will come there, Chile will profit from that economy of scale as well, because you will transship the cargo. So, there is nothing to be afraid. I think we need to make sure that we have efficient supply chain in Chile. And we have very good investment policies, so people invest, and then maybe we grow the cargo.
Yeah, regarding efficient supply chain, a question to Steve, being your consultant. What best practices worldwide could Chile learn from in terms of integrating ports, but with dedicated roads and railways?
Yeah, so economically, you always want to get it onto a ship as quickly as possible. It is much cheaper to carry things by ocean than it is by rail, and much cheaper than it is by road. And that speaks to having many ports all the way down the long coastline. However, there's obviously a role, in particular as you think about kind of the bio-oceanic corridors and kind of going into the hinterland. Probably the US is the best example, right, where kind of there is truly an integrated ocean network dropping off in Los Angeles, moving intermodal across the US. And so you can link these up very efficiently. Shippers use a single bill of lading, it's called, basically a single document to move it all the way through, and the shipping lines will manage the move inland for you as well. But I come back to the economics, right? It's always cheaper to put it on a ship for as long as you possibly can. And there's only a relatively few cargoes which it makes sense to say, okay, it's valuable so that I'm going to save time by putting it on rail or road and then put it on a ship. Like if it was very valuable, it would be on a plane.
Very valuable and with a very short life, like fresh products, for instance.
Very valuable, a very short life, it would be on a plane. So anything which goes on a ship by nature is not very urgent.
Yep. And talking about this issue, Oscar, being you the leader of a shipping company that depends not only on what's going on from the port outbound, but also from the port inbound.
Yes.
How efficient are our system in Chile regarding dry ports, regarding roads, regarding railroads, in order to be efficient and be more competitive, since we are you mentioned that we are like a hub coming to Berlin and Singapore. We are very far away from all of our markets by export and import. So we need to be every time and every minute more efficient and more competitive.
Yeah, that's definitely an area where the country has stopped investing, basically. When you look at our highway infrastructure, the significant highways, probably the largest, the latest largest project was done during Ricardo Lagos, o sea, really long time ago, to whom we owe a lot of infrastructure, Mr. Lagos here sitting, and his son. So,
Senator Lagos, we're talking about his father was president.
And what happened is we don't have more trucks on the road because as you see figures, the cargo is more or less the same in Chile today than 14 years ago. Problem is that there is plenty of cars, new cars. people have bought a lot of cars. So
Cars that you bring in cargo.
and we bring them to San Antonio, we should bring them to the 8th region, you know. But so basically, the infrastructure has been slowing down, right? Maintenance needs of many trucks a day. Only San Antonio, Valparaiso, the central region is 6,000 trucks per day average. Huh? So you see all this 22-ton truck moving around, destroying infrastructure. So in Europe, 28% of the cargo is moved by train in a much more complex, dense spider net of railways. We need 2 railways, basically, right? One north to south and one east-west, right? To go to San Antonio. So it's 2 railways. So, yeah, and Chile moves only 5% of the cargo by train.
Yeah,
So it's crazy. So obviously, you should improve the train infrastructure because it's built. The problem is you need to have a speed train, a faster train, and 2-deck train. You need to improve. You know, shooting from the hip, right? $2 billion, you build a train, you improve the whole train from Santiago to Biobío, and you connect completely that region with Santiago. So you can, at the end of the day, export or import there and bring on a train to Chile, less CO2 emissions, less utilization of the highways, more efficient, cheaper, and 100% private investment because this is profitable. What is not profitable is passengers train. And if you have cargo train during the evening, you will be able to finance a passengers train during the day. There was a project which was not unfortunately elected by the government, but crazy that it wasn't, going to Valparaiso and San Antonio through Melipilla. That was a $2.5 billion investment, 100% private, because it was financed by the cargo. But it was chosen Limache, no cargo available, right? So, okay, I hope that doesn't work, and we move back to the original. So, but what I'm saying is, I mean, there are smart investments which will improve efficiency, that will get you faster to the port, and infrastructure on highways and railways is one of them.
Rosario, following with the question I asked to Oscar, also President Frey mentioned in his presentation all the work, and Oscar also mentioned that regarding concessions in Chile, and pretty much nothing has been built since then. What is SOFOFA pushing in terms of a new investment in infrastructure in Chile, in roads and in railroads, as Oscar mentioned? Why we are not reading this in the press every day, that is a strong need, and if we invest in railroads, we will have more capacity in roads because of less demand.
I agree with you, and I think that is a very relevant topic to discuss in our logistic committee. As you mentioned, we have been working with the Corredor Bioceanic, the Bioceanic Corridor, because we believe that is a very good idea to promote this connectivity from Brazil through Paraguay, Argentina, and then Chile. And that in that case, we need to invest in ports in the north, but also in logistic and railroads and highways. But as you mentioned, we need to have more discussion about these topics. It's true we haven't discussed this as relevant as it is, and we need to put more. Maybe Charlie, that is here, is going to inspire by this conversation, be inspired by this conversation, but we need to have more discussions about infrastructure, the relevant issues you mentioned. This is only private investment, so we need to face this with more.
So probably that's an outcome that will come
maybe
from this
out
panel.
of this Chile London, we're going to have new ideas to bring back home, and I believe that private public relationships should be pushed by good ideas and innovative ideas, and maybe we can solve, as you mentioned, propose new things to the government
Sorry that
You were part of that
I-
committee.
Yeah, I was.
But we're no longer in SOFOFA.
No longer anymore. You kick me guys out.
But maybe you're coming back.
No, there is a governance issue in the ports. Because in the roads, you have one minister which is owning basically the case, right? In the case of the ports, and believe me, we have a lot of experience because we've been dealing 20 years with small problems. You go to talk to the port authority says, yeah, that's not really so you go to talk to the SEP, then you go to the Minister of Transport, you end up with the Minister of Obras Públicas. So nobody is a real owner, right? And on these kind of things, you really need the state to be efficient and present because building port is like to build a highway. You make a tender, one wins, you don't build two highways, you build one. So this has to be an interconnected system that works. And today, I think, is too much decentralized the decision making, particularly now that you have the opportunity to re-tender everything. Now somebody should sit in an office, think on the whole thing, see where the production areas are, see what kind of infrastructure you need to build everywhere in order to make it efficient, and then to launch the tenders in an organized manner. Because now there is overlap of 1 or 2 years here and there, and that will be a disaster for the concession tenders because the threat of building a 6.5 million TEU port will scare away many investors on smaller ports around, right? Because this will be a black hole to suck all the cargo, creating lack of resilience. Because let me tell you one thing, I mean, we know about unions, because unions in the terminals are very strong, very organized. So if you have one port with two operators controlling 6.5 million TEU capacity, so basically more than what the country exports, one strike with 30 people blocking the entrance will paralyze the country. And if you have one earthquake, as we did have, right, because the port infrastructure was demised by the earthquake, so a lot of investment was done to recover. And what if the outer port is finished or something happens there? So you need to have resilient supply chain. For that, you need to have all your eggs in different places. I mean, of course, central area is relevant. You can build 3, I want to repeat, you can have 6.5 million TEU of capacity in the central north, so 3 more than today, with $2.5 billion investment.
So half that was
Half
stated.
of the megaport.
Yeah.
So then one needs to question ourselves who will pay that investment, because the profits in the last 10 years of all the 3 ports which are operating in the central zone added up is $35 million per day, per year.
Oh.
You tell me now, how do you pay $4.5 billion investment if they are on budget building, right? So you need 100-year, 150-year concession.
And very low interest rate.
And very low interest rates.
Steve, let's go back to an international view of the port system, because you not only have experience as a consultant, but also you had a real experience working for shipping companies and in ports, and lived for more than 20 years in Asia, Singapore and Hong Kong, I guess. China, we talk outside, has made massive investments in port infrastructure. And out of the 20 most efficient ports in the world, I understand that 15 out of them are in Asia. And looking ahead 20 more years, because this is an industry that cannot be faced in the next 5 years. It's a very long-term industry. What would you recommend? Should we invest in new ports? Or what can we learn from your experience in how do things in a better way? Because we have talked about roads, dry ports, railroads, but what else?
So yes, I had the privilege of living in China for 13 years, and I lived on the mainland. Initially, I was in Shanghai, and then I actually lived in Shenzhen. Shenzhen, as you may know, back in 1980 was a small fishing village just across the border from Hong Kong. But through the development of a special economic zone and a large port, now the third largest port in the world, it became the manufacturing center of the world. And that, I think, gives us ideas for how to think about economic growth. And I completely agree that kind of you need a large port if you have a large economy. The question is which one comes first, right? And actually, the large port can help you build the large economy. And so I was lucky enough to be in meetings with many of the Chinese port operators and port authorities, and kind of they were not building these large ports for economic profit, right? The port operators in China, it's concessions. They just about break even. They'll never pay back the billions of capex which went into those ports. But they were doing it for the greater good of the economy around because of what it was going to do in terms of stimulating jobs, stimulating production. And from a small fishing village, there's now more than 20 million people living in the Shenzhen area. And so by taking a long-term view and building infrastructure ahead of demand and putting in place the tax structures, the labor mobility, they were able to attract these young workforce into the region. And kind of that's what I would ask as the open question. Is there a similar model for you? Right? You do have the benefit of low energy prices. You could have you have the benefit that manufacturing is moving out of China now because of tariffs, because of diversification of manufacturing. You potentially have the advantage of a young workforce who was keen to move into manufacturing, keen to move into production. Right? Would a large port for you help stimulate that kind of economic growth in the same way that it did for China? But I think coming from a sort of almost port-centric development, there's a lot of value which it can deliver to the economy.
Good. I will go back, Rosario, for the bioceanic corridor. Basically, was an initiative that started more than 10 years ago.
30, I guess.
30.
With the Soria family in the north, but 10 years
30,
ago it
30
started like
years
getting...
ago. But the completion still depends on working to be done in Paraguay and Argentina, as well as in Brazil and in Chile. A few days ago, SOFOFA participated in a round of negotiations in Mato Grosso do Sul as a part of the Fórum Empresarial Chile-Brazil. So here the question, from the perspective of Chile's business community, when do you realistically see that or expect that this will be operational? And what should Chilean companies do in order to take full advantage of this new route that, if completed, will reduce by 10 days the transit time between Brazil and Chile, which I believe it could become a huge opportunity for Chilean ports, especially in the north, not in the center part of the country.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, at SOFOFA we have been very actively participating in the process because we believe that is a huge opportunity for the ports in the north, but also for the logistic industry and other industries. But I don't know when it's realistically being operating, because it's mentioned that it's going to be operating in 2026, but we need to face the challenge to not only be operating the corridor and the highways, we need to be prepared for security systems, interconnectivity. So I think it's more realistic to think near 2030 that is going to be fully operated. But as you mentioned, Chilean companies should be facing those opportunities with a long-term opportunity view. Until the corridor is fully operative, we need to start mapping business opportunities, I guess, not only in the port system, but also exploring logistical, commercial alliance, access to warehousing. They were mentioned It was mentioned last week in the
In Chile'S, Spain?
in Chile'S, Brazil.
Okay.
In Brazil,
Okay.
they mentioned us.
In the forum.
Are you going to offer us some opportunities in logistic or maybe in a soft-free place where we can put our warehouses? So we need to be prepared for that. Maquila also is a very good opportunity if we are going to bring some food, meat, I don't know, fruits from Paraguay, from Brazil. Are we going to put some industries to process those goods and to give some, ¿cómo se dice? Valor agregado?
Value added.
Value added to those industries. Maybe because Chile have these huge treaties with a lot of countries all around the world, we can improve those main meat, fruits, and whatever, and then export another value-added product. So I think we have this opportunity. We have enough time, but we need to do it now. And as you mentioned, it's not only ports. Maybe we need to reorient investment to the north and also to the south because of the hydrogen opportunity that we are having in Magallanes. But it's a conversation that we need to face.
We need to
now.
make decisions. That's
We need to make
the word,
now
no?
decisions.
Agreements and decisions. Those are the two words that we need to make in the country.
But we need to be coordinated also with Paraguay, Argentina, and also Brazil.
Yeah,
If I may share,
of course.
if I may share an international example on it. If you went back 25 years and you were importing goods from Asia into New York, you would probably take it to Los Angeles and then you would put it on a train. And so it's the equivalent of the bioceanic corridor. You take it to a port on the West Coast and then you use the train. Now, the majority of the cargo to New York from Asia goes through the Panama Canal and up the other side on a ship on the ocean. And it's driven by the economics, right? And it's always cheaper to move things by ship than it is by rail and much cheaper than by road. So unless you've got goods which are valuable enough and willing to pay, it's quite hard to justify taking things fully coast to coast. That said, for sort of Western Brazil, other locations, absolutely, you want to try and improve your hinterland connectivity and get the exports going through Chile.
Steve mentioned building ports and value added in columns come later. Rosario mentioned the opportunities of this corridor, and also Steve mentioned what's going on in the US. But we've been coming from a world that pretty much tariff went to zero everywhere, or very low. So commerce increased dramatically, exponentially over the years in the last 30 to 40 years. And goods were made where they were more being productive. And then shipping also became cheap. Do you think that this reshape of commerce with this tariff war will have an impact? Or this is something that is a short term and it will come back to normality in the near future?
Because of professional deformation, I like to look at data more than opinions. The US represents globally 14% of the global trade, right? 14% of the global trade. For China represents 14% of their exports. 50% of the exports of China are within Asia, 20% with the EU, 14% the US, the rest is everybody else. So, what you've seen today is the US, right, rewriting a bit the treaties, the commercial treaties. What you've seen in the rest of the players of the world is absolute adherence to the agreements, right? So my guess is the US will probably diminish a bit their presence in the global trade. So they will move from 14 to, I don't know, 10. There is a study being done in McKinsey, as I know, that I have there to read, right? So when you look at the macroeconomic impact, Dow Jones is booming, S&P is booming. Why? Because is 0.7 points of GDP. It's a tax reform equivalent to 0.7 points of GDP. If you remember, Chile in the beginning of this government was putting 2.5% of GDP, right? So I would say in general, the world materially will continue to operate as it does, because it's not only cheap labor. China, by the way, is not anymore cheap labor. It's a complete ecosystem of different small goods, very complex interconnections, which allows you to do. So I don't believe that people will start doing T-shirts in Manhattan again, right? I mean, I don't believe that that will happen. Probably for some very critical goods for the supply chain. So let's say chips, not chips. Yeah, that may entitle a risk, but this is no volume, right? When we look at the figures today, first half of the year, with all this noise, 4.8% growth on traded volumes. Next half a year is going to be more or less the same, 3.5%. So it's a very resilient. I mean, these are huge ecosystems which are not easy to replace. Of course, there may be industries that are very much affected by the tariffs. We have some that may be affected, right? But as an overall picture, I don't see this changing the landscape. I see probably carving out a little bit more the US out of the global commerce system. Everything else is working normally, but also the US is working normally today.
So more of reshuffling of
it's a
commerce
price.
rather than a reduction.
It's a price issue.
Yep.
You're changing prices.
Yeah.
One time.
Steve, every time when we come to London or to Madrid last Friday or even to Chile'Day in New York, and you look Chile as a country from abroad, things look much better than what we'll discuss inside the country. So I would like to take advantage of you being a foreigner sitting here in this panel. And what if you were to make one recommendation, one concrete action to our policymakers? We have here 2 senators, and one for the private sector in order to improve Chile's competitiveness through infrastructure. What that would be?
You have a number of really strong natural advantages, right? The cheap energy, the long coastline, the ports you've already got, right? It can be, I would set a high ambition for trying to do more manufacturing. Right? China is diversifying, is globalizing. Production is moving out. Let's invest in ports to make our logistics the cheapest, most efficient in the region, and therefore win the inbound investment in manufacturing.
Good. And Rosario, since you are the chairwoman of the SOFOFA, and entrepreneurs look not for the next year, but for the next 20 to 30 years, what should we do in order to, how would you be happy by saying we solve our competitiveness challenges?
First of all, we need to invest in people to prepare them for the future. And obviously, education is a very key issue that we need to take care. But also, we need to talk more about innovation and technology. In the next room, they are talking about fintech and AI. And I think that maybe we should be talking more about what we can do differently. We have huge opportunities. The world is open for Chileans all around the world. Here, there are really good startups like getting bigger, and they're pushed by Chilean people. So we have the talent, we have the creativity, and we need to be more like courageous to ask difficult questions inside our business models, and also how to connect with different people all around the world. We have huge opportunities, I believe in what you said. And also we have the talent, but we need to prepare all the people in our country for that.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I think we are coming to an end. This was a very interesting panel. I truly believe that we as a country have important challenges in infrastructure. We've done a good job in the last 35, 40 years, but we need to do more if we're going to go to a second step and be really more efficient in a world that cost became a very important issue to get to the markets from Chile and to Chile. So thank you very much for attending this panel. And that's it. Thank you very much for you being here.